The stagecoach wheels snapped just as they hit the bend in the canyon. It didn't scream, it didn't cry out, it just cracked sharp, final, like a bone under pressure, and the coach lurched sideways with a shudder that nearly threw Clara Mee Whittaker from her seat. "Hold on," the driver barked, reins whipping as dust roared past the open windows. Clara grabbed the side rail, her knuckles white in the desert glare. Her hat flew off. The brim of it caught the wind and sailed into the ravine like a scrap of paper. Her breath caught in her chest. She wasn't sure if she was terrified or just awake for the first time in weeks. The horses screamed. The wagon thudded, skidded, then stopped half-tilted on the edge of the red dirt road that wound like a scar through the canyon. No one spoke. Clara's hair had come loose. It stuck to her cheeks, damp with sweat and nerves. The older woman across from her muttered a prayer. A child clutched his mother's arm. The driver spat, muttered something about goddamn wheels and worse roads, and climbed down. Clara sat there, chest heaving, fists clenched in her skirt, staring out at the endless stretch of sun and stone. This wasn't Boston. This was something else entirely. 10 miles later, they limped into Laredo just after noon. The town shimmered in the heat like it was holding its breath. Everything looked sun-bleached wood, stone, even the people. There were no paved streets, no tall church towers or trimmed hedges, just wide, dusty roads, low buildings, and a handful of stray dogs panting in the shade of a mercantile awning. The sign swinging above the general store read, "Sealers Whittaker and Goods." That was her uncle. Clara stepped down from the broken coach with shaking legs. The hem of her dress was coated in dust, her boots cracked from the dry air. She wore no hat now, no gloves. She looked less like the daughter of a respected Boston professor and more like someone who'd lost a bet to the desert. A man walked toward her from the general store, broad shoulders, rolled-up sleeves, sun-dark skin. He wasn't old, but he moved like someone who'd already been through the hardest part of life. "Miss Whittaker?" he asked. His voice was quiet, unhurried. "Yes," she said, blinking up at him. "Sealers is out back. I'm Elias Boone. I work the forge across the street." He reached for her trunk before she could say another word, lifted it like it weighed nothing. She stared after him. Something about the way he moved, silent, like heat over metal, made her feel as if she'd just been handed a question she didn't yet know how to answer. Her uncle looked exactly as she remembered, tall, tired, and 2 parts barkeep, 1 part stubborn. He hugged her once, hard and brief, then poured her water and asked no questions about the train or the coach or the letter she'd written 2 months ago with shaking hands and ink stains on the edges. "You're welcome to stay as long as you need," Sealers said, setting down a glass. "This isn't much, but it's yours now." Clara nodded. She didn't trust her voice yet. The apartment above the store was small but clean. A cot, a window, a washbasin. Her parents' books wouldn't fit here. Her mother's piano certainly wouldn't. But the silence here was different. Not heavy like grief, just empty. She could work with empty. That night, the sounds of the town came alive beneath her window. Horses, laughter, something that sounded like music, but off-key. Someone fired a pistol, probably at the moon. Clara sat at the desk and pulled out her worn leather journal. It had survived the train, the coach, and the canyon. Inside, her handwriting had changed from neat, perfect lines to slanted, messy scrawls, like someone trying to outrun their own words. She opened to the last page. "I keep thinking it will all stop hurting once I get far enough away. I was wrong, but maybe wrong in the right direction." Then she paused, pen hovering, and added, "I've never been kissed. I don't know why that suddenly matters." 2 days passed. Clara helped in the store. Sealers introduced her to half the town in the same breath. "This is my niece, Clara. She's from Boston. She won't be staying long." Then he'd wink and wave someone off. Everyone seemed to accept her without fanfare, or maybe they just didn't care. Laredo didn't look like a town that wasted much time on introductions. Clara noticed Elias again at the forge, sleeves rolled, sweat shining on his temples. He didn't talk much. He nodded once when he caught her looking. She flushed. She wasn't sure why he hadn't smiled. Then there was Sam Rourke, deputy sheriff, golden-haired and fast-talking. He tipped his hat every time he saw her, like it was a reflex. He had charm, like someone who knew it was currency. "Miss Whittaker," he said on the 3rd day, "I reckon you haven't had a proper welcome. I could show you the nicer parts of town." Are there nicer parts? She asked. He grinned. No, but you'll like the folks who pretend there are. On the fifth night, a storm rolled over the plains. Not rain, just wind and heat, and thunder that never broke. It rattled the windows and made the lamps flicker. Clara couldn't sleep. She sat at the desk again, wrote one sentence, erased it, then another. Elias Boone looks like someone who lost something he's still carrying. I think I know what that feels like. And then, almost without thinking, she added, but maybe out here, I might finally want to be kissed. She stared at the line, the candle flickered, the wind howled. And Clara Whittaker, alone in a strange town with no hat and too many thoughts, set her pen down and whispered into the quiet room, I think I'm tired of waiting. But maybe out here, I might finally want to be. The first thing Clara noticed about Café Reyes was the sound metal spoons against ceramic mugs, heels clicking on hardwood floors, the low hum of Spanish lullabies playing softly from the back. The second thing she noticed was the smell, cinnamon, coffee beans roasted dark, and a hint of wood smoke that clung to the rafters like memory. It was a far cry from the refined tea parlors of Boston. Nothing dainty, nothing quiet, but it was alive. Come early or come thirsty, said the woman behind the counter, sliding 2 mugs into the hands of waiting ranchers. Either way, you'll leave with something hot. Clara lingered by the doorway, uncertain whether she should step in or turn back to the safe, predictable rhythm of stocking dry goods at her uncle's store. But before she could decide, the woman behind the counter spotted her. You're Silas's niece, right? The woman called out, drying her hands on her apron. Clara, is it? Yes, ma'am. I ain't, ma'am. I'm Lola. Don't age me. Clara smiled, stepping forward. Then yes, I'm Clara. Well, Clara, are you just sightseeing or can I get you a mug? She hesitated. I was just walking. The store's a little slow today. Laredo's always slow unless somebody's been shot or someone's getting married. She eyed Clara thoughtfully. You hungry? Clara shook her head, but Lola was already pouring something into a chipped mug and setting it on the counter. First one's on the house, Lola said. Second one depends on if you talk like a Yankee all day or not. Clara sat down, unsure what to say next. The drink was thick, sweet, and unfamiliar, spiced chocolate maybe or something close. You like it? I don't know, Clara said honestly, and Lola laughed. That's fair. They talked about nothing at first, whether the stagecoach wreck, the god-awful dust. Clara asked questions more than she answered them. She liked listening. Lola spoke like someone who'd been through fire and wasn't afraid of burning again. You ever worked a cafe before? Lola asked after a while, eyeing her over the mug. No, Clara said, I've read about them. Lola snorted, Lord, books don't teach you how to deal with drunk cowboys at sunrise. I imagine not. Well, Lola said, setting her mug down, if you're looking to do something with your time other than play shopgirl, I could use help in the mornings. You got a quiet face. People like talking to quiet faces. Clara blinked. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a reason to stay busy, Lola said. Don't make it more than that. The cafe door opened then, and the light shifted. Elias Boone stepped inside. He didn't say anything, just walked in, brushed dust from his sleeves, and nodded once to Lola. Your hinge is fixed, he said simply. About time, she muttered, nodding toward the back. Clara, this is Elias. Elias, this is Clara. She's new but not too fragile. Clara turned toward him, her mouth dry. Hello, she said. He gave her the briefest glance. Ma'am. Then he walked to the back, the door swinging shut behind him. Clara blinked. He doesn't talk much. Nope, Lola said. But when he does, you listen. That man's words are worth a lot because he don't weigh a stem. She nodded toward the back door. Come see, might as well learn what a good hinge looks like. Clara followed, if only to keep her hands from trembling. The cafe's back room was smaller, cooler, with a slant of light coming in from a cracked window. The door hinge gleamed newly polished, swinging smooth with the push of a pinky. Elias crouched near the floor, checking something in the baseboard. He didn't look up. I don't fix things fancy, he said, just so they stop breaking. Clara didn't know if he was talking to her or himself, maybe both. It looks fine to me, she said softly. He stood slowly like a man who remembered every wound his body ever took. You'll learn quick, or you won't last here, he said, not unkindly. Clara met his eyes. I don't plan to leave. Elias didn't answer, but something in his jaw shifted just slightly like her words had brushed a place he'd kept locked up tight. He nodded once and walked past her, boots heavy against the wood. Back at the counter, Lola handed Clara a cloth and pointed to the empty mugs. "You start tomorrow," she said. "Sunrise." Clara blinked. "But I didn't say you didn't have to." That night, Clara couldn't sleep again. She walked the length of her small room, then sat by the window, staring out over the quiet town. The sky here was different, wide, wild, full of stars that didn't blink politely like they did back home. They shined fiercely. She thought of Elias Boone, the way his eyes barely moved but saw everything, the way he didn't rush to fill silence, the way he said things like he'd earned every word with pain. Then she thought of Lola, tough, grounded, with a smile that dared you to lie to her. People here were not what she'd expected, not simple, not rough in the way books said Westerners were, just honest, as if there was no room for pretending under all that sky. She lit the candle, took out her journal, wrote one line, "That blacksmith watches like he's waiting for something to break." She paused. "And maybe I'm not as unbreakable as I thought." She closed the book. The wind rattled the glass lightly. Her breath fogged the pain. For the first time in weeks, she felt something shift inside her chest. Not sadness, not fear, curiosity. She would take the job. She would wake before dawn. She would learn how to hold a tray and keep a straight face and pour hot coffee for men who hadn't bathed in 3 days. Because the quiet, orderly life she'd planned in Boston was gone, dead like her parents, buried like her old self, and something in Laredo, maybe the wind, maybe the dust, maybe the man with the scar on his hand and the fire in his eyes was starting to make her want something again. Not safety, not propriety, just more. That blacksmith watches like he's waiting for something to break. Clara was not a morning person. She'd always believed that the world didn't begin until after a proper breakfast, 2 cups of tea, and a quiet hour to herself. But here in Laredo, the world didn't ask your permission. It simply happened, whether you were ready or not. And at Café Ray's, it happened before the sun even cleared the rooftops. By the time Clara slipped through the cafe's front door, the air already smelled of coffee and firewood. Lola was behind the counter, hair tied up, apron already dusted with flour, flipping cornbread onto a tray with the kind of practice speed Clara could only dream of. "You're late," Lola said without looking up. "It's not even 6, Clara whispered, half asleep. "Exactly, you're late." Lola jerked her chin toward a row of mugs. "Start there. Customers will be in soon. Most won't say thank you, all will expect a full cup." Clara rolled up her sleeves, smoothed her skirt, and got to work. At first, it felt like a game. Pour, wipe, smile, nod. She even managed to remember who took sugar and who didn't. But by the time the sun hit the windows, her arms ached, her feet throbbed, and someone had called her darling 4 times in a row. "I don't even know what that means anymore," Clara muttered, sliding a plate of eggs to a man with a voice like gravel. "It means they want you to like 'em," Lola said, "and they think they are clever for trying." Clara laughed, and something in her chest loosened. There was rhythm here, a strange, backhanded kind of affection. The men were loud, the women louder, and no one seemed particularly careful about anything except their coffee temperature. "Who's that one?" Clara asked, nodding toward a woman sitting alone near the window, smoking a small cigar. "Emilia Vargas," Lola said, "widowed 3 times, sells horses and bad advice. Never cross her. Never lend her money, and never believe her when she says she's done drinking." Noted. It went on like that, Lola tossing names and warnings over her shoulder while Clara tried to memorize faces. By mid-morning, the tables were nearly full, the air thick with the smell of bacon and sweat and dust. Then the door opened, and in walked Elias Boone. He didn't scan the room. Didn't search for an open seat. He went to the same spot he always did, back left corner, nearest the wall, and sat without a word. Clara's hand tightened around the coffee pot. Lola raised an eyebrow. "He's not going to bite you." "I didn't say he would. You thought it." "I did not. Your face did." Clara gave her a look, then walked over to his table. Elias looked up, just enough to register her presence. "Coffee?" she asked. He nodded once. She poured. The cup didn't tremble in her hand, but it was close. "You're working here now," he said, more observation than question. "I am." "Why?" She shrugged. "I needed something to do." Elias didn't respond. He just wrapped his hands around the mug, as if the warmth mattered more than the drink. "You ever talk more than 10 words at a time?" Clara asked. "Not if I can help it." That made her smile despite herself. "Anything else?" she asked, stepping back. He looked up at her again, more directly this time. His eyes were dark but not unkind. You keep pouring like that, he said quietly. You're gonna see a lot more than you bargained for. Clara blinked. What's that supposed to mean? But Elias just turned his eyes back to the window, steam rising between them. After the rush, Clara collapsed onto a stool behind the counter. Lola handed her a glass of water and a dishcloth. Good first day, she said. You only spilled twice and nobody punched anybody. Is that common? You'd be surprised. Clara took a long drink and wiped her forehead with her sleeve. I think I might actually like it here. Lola studied her for a moment. You're not who I expected. I get that a lot. You've got that Boston posture but not the nose for it. You listen more than you talk, and you don't flinch when men get loud. Clara shrugged. I've been through worse. Lola nodded once, like that explained everything. You want to stay busy? She asked. Always. Good, then come with me. I've got something you need to see. The kitchen in the back of the cafe was hot, narrow, and smelled like chili peppers and old wood. But past the stove, through a crooked door, was a narrow stairwell that led to the roof. Lola climbed without looking back. Clara followed, breathless. At the top, Leodo unfolded in every direction, flat, sun-baked rooftops, a few smoke trails, horses hitched to posts like they were napping in place. The sky was an ocean of blue with no shore in sight. Why are we up here? Clara asked. Because when the world starts to feel like it's closing in, you need to remember how big it really is. Lola sat down on a crate, lit a cigarette, and passed one to Clara, who refused it with a shake of her head. You don't have to smoke, Lola said, but you ought to learn how to sit still. They sat in silence for a while, the wind tugging gently at Clara's hair. Elias comes here every morning, Clara said suddenly. Why? Because he lost something once. And sometimes being near noise makes the silence in your own head quieter. Clara swallowed. You mean he lost? Lola looked over. A woman, years ago, before your time here, before the cafe even. Oh, you want to know more? Ask him, but he won't tell you if you ask too soon. They sat a while longer. Finally, Clara whispered, he doesn't seem broken. Lola smirked. That's 'cause you haven't seen the cracks yet. Later that afternoon, as Clara walked back to the store, she passed the blacksmith's shop. The heat inside rippled the air. She paused at the door, hearing the rhythmic clang of hammer to steel. She didn't go in. She didn't need to. The sound alone told her something she couldn't yet name. That night, back in her room, she opened her journal. He doesn't fix people, she wrote. Only metal. Metal doesn't flinch. She paused, tapped her pen, then underlined the last part. She thought of Elias, the way he moved like someone who'd already fallen and decided to stay standing anyway. She didn't understand him, but she wanted to. And that, she realized, was the beginning of something far more dangerous than curiosity. I don't fix people, Elias said. Only metal. Metal don't flinch. The next morning, Clara woke with a stubborn ache behind her eyes and the heavy feeling that something had shifted just slightly underneath her skin. She dressed slower than usual. Her body moved, but her mind was somewhere else. Somewhere behind the blacksmith's forge, in the way Elias Boone's eyes hadn't flinched when she poured his coffee. In the way he'd said you're gonna see more than you bargained for, like a warning or a dare. The cafe was quieter today. Midweek meant less foot traffic, more time to wipe tables and listen to the murmurs of townsfolk who spoke with slow, sand-worn rhythm. Clara worked quietly, watching, absorbing. Lola caught her leaning against the counter around noon, staring out the window toward the blacksmiths across the road. You're not subtle, sugar, she said, tossing a rag at her, and you're wasting a perfectly good daydream. I'm not daydreaming. I was just thinking. Same thing, only difference is one's got more blushing. Clara shook her head, but she was smiling. Lola didn't push, not at first. She wiped down a stack of mugs, humming under her breath. Then she said casually, you want to know what happened to him? Clara didn't answer. Elias, Lola clarified, since I know that's where your thoughts have been parked all morning. Clara hesitated. I don't want to pry. Then don't, just listen. Clara stopped wiping the counter and turned toward her. Lola poured herself a cup of coffee, took a sip, then began. Years ago, 5-6. Elias was engaged. Her name was Maria Fern, sweet girl, soft voice, big laugh, the kind that fills a room without asking permission. They were good together, balanced. She taught him how to dance. Clara blinked. Elias, dancing. I know, Lola said with a smirk. She dragged it out of him bit by bit. That man's stubborn as an old tree root, but she made him softer. Lola paused, her face darkening. She died during a raid near the border. They were traveling to visit her family when it happened. No one knows the full story. Elias doesn't talk about it, but he came back alone, quiet, different. He hasn't worn a gun since. Gave up dancing too. Clara swallowed hard. Did they ever catch the men who? No, and he wouldn't have wanted the law involved anyway. Why not? Because Elias doesn't believe in justice the way most folks do. He believes in cost, that everything good comes with a price, and everything bad leaves a scar. Lola finished her coffee and stood. And ever since Maria, he's been living like a man who paid too much and doesn't trust anyone not to hand him another bill. Clara looked down at her hands. They were trembling slightly. He seems so controlled, she murmured. Pain looks tidy when it's buried deep. Later that afternoon, Clara crossed the street to the blacksmith shop. She didn't knock. Just hovered near the entrance, fingers curled tight around the hem of her apron. Heat rolled from inside the forge in thick, slow waves. The rhythmic clang of hammer on metal rang out steady, patient. Elias glanced up once, said nothing, and went back to work. She stood there for a full minute before he spoke. You here for a horseshoe? No. Then why? Clara stepped closer. I thought maybe you could teach me. He stopped mid-swing. Teach you what? How to use a hammer. Elias set the piece of iron back into the fire and turned toward her, brows raised. You think it's that easy? No, she said, lifting her chin. But I think I can learn. He stared at her long enough to make her pulse shift. Then he handed her a pair of thick gloves from a shelf behind him. Put these on. She did. He moved beside her, his motions careful but not slow. He picked up a piece of scrap metal, placed it on the anvil, and handed her the hammer, feet apart, shoulders steady. Don't swing from the elbow, use your body. Clara tried. Her first strike clanged awkwardly, too light to matter. Again, Elias said. She tried again and again. He moved behind her, adjusting the angle of her stance, the tension in her grip. Like this, he murmured, guiding her hand. His touch was steady, professional, but something in her chest jumped anyway. The metal sang with every hit. When they paused, Clara stepped back, wiping her forehead. Harder than it looks, she admitted. Elias nodded once. That's true of most things. They stood in silence, the fire crackling behind them. Why did you stop wearing a gun? She asked before she could think better of it. His jaw tensed. Clara took a breath. Lola told me about Maria. He looked away, not angry, just distant. I didn't ask her to, Clara added quickly. She volunteered. I figured. She said you stopped dancing. I did. Because it reminded you of her? He looked at her then, really looked. Because it made me believe something good could last. Clara nodded, quietly. I'm sorry. Elias reached for the hammer again, staring down at the anvil like it held all the answers he didn't want to say aloud. I don't fix people, he said. Only metal. Metal don't flinch. Clara's heart stuttered. She wanted to say something, anything to make him see her, not just as the new girl in town, but as someone who understood that kind of pain, that kind of fear. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, she picked up the hammer again. Then maybe, she said, you can teach me how not to flinch. His eyes flicked to hers just a second, but something softened there. He didn't answer, but he didn't say no. That night, Clara sat at her window, the journal open on her lap. He lost someone, she wrote, and now he walks like the ground under him might give out at any second, but he never looks down. She tapped the pen against the page, thinking about the weight of the hammer, the heat of the forge, the way her hands had shaken and steadied in his. She thought of how Lola had said everything good comes with a price, and how Elias still looked like he was deciding if he could afford anything good again. Clara closed the journal. Outside, the stars were beginning to take their places. She wasn't sure where this was going, but she was sure she wanted to follow. If I let you touch the fire, he said, you better not pull away. Leodo transformed overnight. The dust still clung to the boots and windowsills, but it wore ribbons now red and gold, strung from one building to another like someone had tried to decorate the wind. Flags flapped from balconies. Paper lanterns hung in crooked rows above the street. Children ran barefoot through the alleys, chasing music. It was the first day of the annual border festival, 3 days of dancing, food, firecrackers, and too much mezcal. No one worked. Everyone wore their best, or at least their brightest. Even Lola had swapped her apron for a red embroidered blouse and a silver comb in her hair. Clara stood on the cafe porch that morning, hands on the railing, watching the square come alive. I haven't seen anything like this, she said, more to herself than anyone. Lola leaned beside her, sipping from a chipped mug. It's the only time this town pretends it isn't tired. Clara smiled. Do people dance? Some dance, some drink, some try both and end up in the fountain. I don't dance, Clara said, almost shyly. Lola raised an eyebrow. You don't, or you haven't. Clara didn't answer. Lola said, well, that dress ain't meant for standing still, so if someone asked you to dance tonight, you better say yes. I don't know anyone who would. Lola just gave her that look, the one that said don't play dumb with me, and disappeared back into the kitchen. By sunset, the town pulsed with music. Violins and guitars spilled out from every doorway. The scent of roasted corn and fried dough followed Clara as she moved through the square, arms linked with Sam Rourke, who'd offered to be her guide for the night. I'm warning you now, he said, flashing his usual easy grin. I can't dance worth a damn, but I look good trying. Clara laughed. That's a dangerous combination. They weaved through crowds, stopping for tamales wrapped in warm cloth and a bottle of something that tasted like sugar and smoke. Sam pointed out everyone who was married, who pretended not to be, who had a temper, who owed him $5. When the first notes of a polka rang out from the bandstand, Sam offered his hand. She hesitated. Come on, he said, you already said you don't dance. Let's go make that a lie. Clara let him lead her. He wasn't wrong, he danced with more enthusiasm than skill, but he kept her laughing, spinning her until she forgot to be nervous. People clapped along. Someone tossed flower petals from the balcony above. For a brief, dizzy moment, Clara felt light, real. Not a guest in this dusty town, not a girl running from grief, just a woman in a blue dress, laughing under the lanterns. Then she saw him, Elias, standing near the edge of the square, arms crossed, not smiling, watching her, not possessively, not jealously, just watching. Clara's breath hitched. Sam spun her once more, then let her go. You okay? I need a moment, she said, stepping away. She moved toward the edge of the crowd, where the music thinned and the shadows grew long. Elias hadn't moved. Are you always this still? She asked when she reached him. Only when it matters. She crossed her arms. Watching me? He shrugged. You looked like you were enjoying yourself. I was. He nodded, like that should be the end of it, but it wasn't. You don't dance anymore, I heard, she said. I don't. You miss it? Elias looked away. Some things are better left where they died. Clara flinched at the bluntness, but then he looked at her again, softer this time. You were smiling, he said. I haven't seen you do that yet. I'm allowed, you are. They stood in silence as a new song began, slower, lower, the kind that pulled people closer. Clara glanced back at the dancer floor, then at him. I've never been kissed, she said suddenly. Elias didn't move. I thought I should say it out loud just once, she added, to someone who won't laugh. I'm not laughing, he said. Clara let the silence stretch. Everyone back in Boston thought I was saving myself, or broken, or too proud. The truth is, I was just waiting to want it. He was quiet for a moment, and now, he asked. She looked up at him, eyes steady. Now I think I might. Elias took a breath that sounded like it cost him something. I'm not the kind of man people weigh it for, he said. I'm not people, she answered. His eyes met hers. Something unspoken passed between them, too heavy for words, too fragile for touch. But he didn't step forward. He didn't lean in, neither did she, not yet. A firework cracked in the distance. Clara looked up, startled. Light scattered across the sky, red and gold, mirrored in Elias's dark eyes. She smiled, slow and sure. You think too much, she told him, better than saying too much. She laughed, touché. Later, back in her room, Clara opened her journal. Tonight I danced, not well but freely. I smiled at a man who makes jokes and laughed with people I barely know. But the one who didn't touch me said the most. She paused. I've never been kissed, she wrote again, and I don't think I want just anyone to be the first. She underlined it. Outside, more fireworks bloomed. She didn't open the window. She wanted the quiet now, the stillness, not absence but anticipation. I've never been kissed, she says, and I don't think I want just anyone to be the first. The morning after the festival, the music was gone, but something heavier had taken its place in the air. A kind of tension, like the earth was holding its breath and waiting for something to snap. Clara felt it before anyone said a word. She stood behind the counter at Café Ray's, wiping down mugs when Sam Rourke stepped in. He wasn't smiling, no hat tip, no teasing drawl. His jaw was tight, dust on his boots, hand resting too close to the gun at his hip. Lola caught it first. She didn't greet him, just set down her spoon and narrowed her eyes. What happened? Sam didn't bother with pleasantries. Gomez Ranch got hit last night. Lola swore softly in Spanish. Clara froze. By who? Sam looked at her. Raiders, maybe the Vasquez boys, maybe someone worse. But the festival, she started. Exactly, everyone's distracted, doors left open, folks drunk or off guard. They know how to time it. Was anyone hurt? One of the ranch hands. Beat up bad but alive. Horses taken, supplies too. Clara tried to imagine it, men riding in fast and silent under cover of music and celebration. The town too loud to hear the danger. It made her stomach twist. Sam turned to Lola. We'll be posting more patrols. Elias is helping reinforce the stayable doors. At the mention of his name, Clara's chest tightened. Is he armed? She asked before she could stop herself. Sam paused. Not yet. Will he be? Sam didn't answer right away. Elias carries pain like it's a piece of steel he's been shaping too long. If he decides to wear a gun again, it won't be casual. Then he tipped his hat, the gesture slower than usual, and walked out. Lola didn't look at Clara, but her voice was quiet and even. Don't ask questions if you're not ready for the answers. Clara didn't reply. She just set down the mug, untied her apron, and walked out the door. She found Elias at the edge of town, near the stable, hammering a thick iron bolt into a barn door. His sleeves were rolled. There was soot on his hands, sweat on his brow. He didn't look up as she approached. I heard, she said. I figured you would. Why didn't you tell me? Elias hit the bolt once more, then finally turned. What would you have done with the knowing? I don't know, she admitted. Worried sooner, maybe. That's not a solution. I didn't come here for solutions, she snapped, sharper than she meant. They stared at each other. You're going to get involved, aren't you? She asked. Elias looked back at the barn door. I already am. Are you going to carry a gun again? He didn't answer. That's not just your decision, she said quietly. If something happens to you, Elias turned back to her then, eyes harder than she'd seen before. I've been walking around half dead for years, Clara. This town is the only thing that's made me feel even a little human again. If I can keep it safe, I will. And what about keeping yourself safe? His voice dropped. That part's not guaranteed. Clara stepped closer. You think that's brave? No, he said. I think it's necessary. The air between them was tight, heavy. You think too much like a soldier, she whispered. You think too much like someone who hasn't lost everything yet. That hit harder than a slap. Elias saw it. Regret flickered in his eyes, but he didn't take the words back. I didn't mean, he started. No, she cut in. You did. She turned, heart pounding, and walked away before he could say more. That night, a windstorm hit Laredo. Nothing violent, just the kind that rattled window panes and made doors creak like ghosts. The kind that kept people up, waiting for sounds that didn't come. Clara couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, staring at the forge across the street. The embers still glowed faintly. Elias was probably still there, hammering something that couldn't scream back. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and left her room. The night was dry and sharp. She crossed the street, boots crunching on the dirt, heart louder than her footsteps. The forge door was cracked open. Elias was there, just as she'd imagined, shirt damp, hammer in hand, eyes focused on glowing steel. He looked up when she stepped in. I shouldn't be here, she said. Probably not, but I am. He set the hammer down. You mad at me? Yes. You scared for me? Yes. He stepped closer, slow, careful, then stay. She stood frozen as he reached for a towel, wiped the sweat from his neck. His voice was lower now. I didn't mean to throw your words back at you earlier. I know, she said. They stood in the glow of the forge, shadows moving like ghosts behind them. I keep trying to stay distant, she whispered, but it's getting harder. Elias's eyes didn't leave hers. I know that feeling, he said, and then soft, so soft he added, the moment I kiss you, I won't be able to unremember it. Clara's breath caught. I haven't asked you to, she said. I know, I'm not ready, I know that too. But I didn't come here because I'm strong, she said, voice shaking. I came because I was scared and tired of being scared alone. He reached out, slow as dawn, and took her hand. They didn't kiss. They just stood there, palm to palm, firelight between them, both too bruised to move fast. Clara let herself lean just slightly forward, her forehead resting against his chest. Elias exhaled like it hurt. Back in her room, she opened the journal again. I don't want him because he's kind. I want him because he's scarred and still choosing to stand anyway. She underlined it, then wrote, the moment I kiss you, I won't be able to unremember it. Then maybe that's exactly the point. The moment I kiss you, Elias said, I won't be able to unremember it. Clara didn't tell anyone about that night in the forge. Not Lola, not Sam, not even her journal at first. It felt like something still forming, like cooling iron not ready to be named, not safe to be held. But she could feel it, solid and heavy in her chest. Elias Boone had not kissed her, and yet somehow it felt like the space between them had changed forever. She carried that silence through the next few days, even as the town buzzed with tighter energy. The kind people don't speak aloud, but that moves through the streets like a shadow. Another ranch was hit 2 nights after the Gomez place, this time farther east, closer to the river. Clara heard about it from Sam at dawn when he came into the cafe with his arm in a sling. What happened? She asked, moving around the counter without thinking. Rifle butt to the shoulder, he muttered, grimacing as he sat down. Nothing broken, just bruised pride. Lola brought him a mug and said nothing. Her expression was pure stone. Did you catch them? Caught a glimpse. Maybe 5 or 6 riders, no markings, moved fast. Clara stared at him. So they are still out there. Sam nodded, cradling the coffee. We've doubled patrols. Folks are boarding up windows. We told folks to be careful about who they open their doors to. And Elias, Sam met her eyes. He's helping, won't carry a gun, but he's setting traps, reinforcing doors. Quiet work, but good. Did you tell him you got hurt? No, I think he already knows, the way he looked at me last night. Sam shook his head, like he's waiting to feel guilty again. Clara swallowed. He's not responsible. Sam gave her a long, slow look. You ever notice how some men carry other people's weight even when they are limping from their own? Clara didn't answer. She didn't have to. That night, Laredo felt different, not louder, just edged. No gunfire, no sirens, but the silence itself felt too thick. Clara stayed late at Café Ray's, helping Lola close up. The 2 women didn't speak much, just moved side by side like soldiers cleaning the barracks after battle. When the front doors were locked and the shutters drawn, Lola finally looked over. You think he's gonna break? Clara blinked. Who? Elias. Clara sighed. I don't know. He's been stitched together for a long time with nothing but guilt and silence. You put pressure on something like that, it either breaks or it holds. I don't want to be the one who breaks him. Then don't pull too hard and don't let go too fast. Clara leaned against the counter. You ever love someone who didn't know how to love you back? Lola raised a brow. You asking as a woman or as someone looking for permission? Clara didn't smile. I've loved men who were ghosts, Lola said finally, and men who thought loving me was a war. Neither ended well, but I'd take that over a man who's never bled. Clara nodded slowly. That's the thing. He has bled. He still does. And it terrifies me how much I want to reach for him anyway. She walked home under a sky filled with clouds instead of stars. The forge was dark. The street was empty, but the quiet no longer felt safe. It felt like something holding its breath. She climbed the stairs to her room, locked the door, and stood there a long moment, hands still on the knob. She was tired, but not the kind of tired that sleep could fix. The kind that lives behind your ribs, in the places where truth gets heavy. She dreamed of fire. Of a knock at her door that never came. Of Elias bleeding into her hands, eyes open and calm. She woke before dawn, heart racing, throat tight. She sat up, fingers clutching the blanket, trying to remember if that fear belonged to her or him. Then she got dressed. She found Elias at the edge of the stables, fitting metal bars over a back window. He didn't turn when he heard her approach. You're out early, he said. So are you? I couldn't sleep. I didn't think you did much of that anyway. He gave a half smile, brief and almost warm. Clara watched him work for a moment. Sam got hurt. I know, he said. You didn't ask about it. Elias paused, then hammered the next bolt in. Didn't have to. That's not an answer. He stopped working, straightened, and looked at her. Really looked. Every time someone gets hurt in this town, I remember Maria. I remember how fast it happens. How you can blink and find yourself in a world you don't recognize anymore. Clara stepped closer. You think you can stop it this time? I don't know, but I'd rather be wrong trying than right doing nothing. She stared at him. You're still carrying it, aren't you? All of it. He didn't deny it. I want to know you, she said softly, not just the part you show when you're fixing things. Elias's face changed barely, but enough. I don't know if you'll like what you find. Let me decide that. A long silence followed. The wind shifted. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster crowed, but the town was still asleep. Clara reached out. Not for his hand, not for his shoulder, just the space between them. You don't have to be whole for someone to stay, she said. His jaw clenched. I'm not afraid of being left. I'm afraid of believing you'll stay. Clara's eyes welled, but she blinked fast. I'm not asking you to dance. I'm just asking you not to shut the door before I've even walked through." Elias looked at her like she was the only sound in a world of silence. Then quietly he said, "God help me, I want you to come in." That night she wrote in her journal, "He's not ready, maybe neither am I, but for the first time I'm not running from the fear, I'm sitting with it. And so is he." Then below that she wrote in a smaller hand, "God help me, I want him to come back." The sound of hammers never stopped that day. From sunrise to dusk, Laredo echoed with the pounding of nails, the dragging of boards, the heavy shuffle of men and women building barricades, reinforcing doors, sharpening tools not meant for violence, but willing to be repurposed. Fear made people efficient. Clara moved through it all with sleeves rolled, apron tied tight, and hair pinned back. She fetched water, passed tools, ran messages. She didn't ask permission. No one did, not anymore. This was what it looked like when A-Town remembered it could bleed. By noon, rumors confirmed what everyone already sensed. The Vasquez gang, or what was left of it, had been seen 2 miles north, riding slow, watching from the ridge. "They're not here to trade," Sam said, pulling a new bandage tight around his shoulder. "They're waiting, testing us, seeing if we'll run. Will we?" Clara asked. Sam looked at her and didn't smile, not this time. Elias stood behind him, silent, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. He hadn't spoken much since that morning, when Clara had found him fitting steel plates to the chapel doors. She could tell something was building inside him, tight and heavy, like heat trapped in a closed room. Then she saw it, on his hip, the gun. It wasn't polished, it wasn't proud, but it was there, worn, scuffed, quiet like him, and it meant something was about to change. That evening, Clara stood in the center of the cafe, helping Lola move crates of dried goods into the cellar beneath the floorboards. "You ever shot one of these?" Lola asked, holding up a rusted shotgun. Clara blinked. "No." "Well, I have," Lola said, setting it down with a grunt, "and I'm still not good at it. But I will aim it at anyone that comes through that door without asking." Clara tried to smile. It didn't quite land. Lola looked at her, then softened. "Listen," she said, "when it starts, it's going to feel loud and slow at the same time. Your body will want to run or scream or freeze. Just pick one thing to do and do it. Don't try to be brave, just stay alive." Clara nodded. "What'll you do?" she asked. "Same thing I always do." Lola cracked her knuckles. "Feed the scared and shoot the stupid." When the first gunshots rang out, it was just after midnight, not close, but not far enough either. Clara sat up in bed, heart slamming against her ribs, the echo still hanging in the air. She didn't have to look out the window to know it had started. The town wasn't asleep anymore. She pulled on her boots with shaking hands, grabbed the small lantern by her bedside, and ran. The church bell rang twice, Laredo's signal for all civilians to gather at the town center. It wasn't a scream, it was a plan. Clara reached Café Ray's just as Lola opened the back door. Her face was calm, but her hands were full of matches and resolve. "Cellar," she said, "now." The first families began arriving, mothers clutching babies, fathers with bleeding knuckles, kids too stunned to cry. Clara moved among them, handing out water, wrapping blankets, lighting lanterns. Above, the world cracked open. Gunfire, horses, shouting. Then a silence so sudden it felt like the earth had stopped breathing. Lola grabbed Clara's arm. "That was the line," she said. They just crossed it. Elias stood on the roof of the blacksmith's, rifle across his back, eyes locked on the alleyway. The raiders had appeared, 6 men, maybe 7. Mismatched coats, dirty hats, one with a scar running across his face like someone had tried to erase him and failed. The man in front raised his voice. "Lay down arms. Give us the shop, the stables, and the Mexican woman. No one else gets hurt." From the shadows, Elias stepped forward. "I don't think so." The scarred man laughed. "You planning to shoot, blacksmith?" Elias didn't blink. "If I have to." Another pause. A wind kicked up, sending dust spinning across the square. "You got death on your breath, son," the man said. Elias cocked the rifle. "No, just iron." And then the first shot fired. Clara crouched behind the counter, breath held, knuckles white around a carving knife she knew would do no good. The sound was chaos, gunfire, glass breaking, boots pounding, horses rearing. Then came shouting, then silence, then more shouting. And then a body slammed against the cafe door. Lola raised the shotgun, finger tight on the trigger. "It's me," Sam's voice came through, pained. He pulled him inside. His leg was bleeding, not badly, but enough to slow him. "They're retreating," he said, panting. "Elias," he held the line, hit one in the shoulder, rest scattered. We'll need to chase them out come morning, but for now. He looked around the room at the crying children, the hunched backs, the silence. We held. Clara didn't realize she was crying until Lola handed her a towel. Hours later, Clara found Elias sitting behind the blacksmith's shop, a cloth pressed to his temple, his shirt torn at the sleeve. She rushed to him. You're hurt, just a scrape. You lied. He smiled, tired. I'm here, aren't I? She dropped beside him, took the cloth, and examined the gash. You could have been killed. I wasn't, but you could have been. His voice was quiet now. That wasn't the worst part. She looked up. What was? He met her gaze. That I wasn't scared. Clara blinked. Why does that scare me more? Because you're the one who has something to lose. She stared at him, breath caught in her throat. And for the first time since she'd arrived in Laredo, she knew, not hoped, not guessed. Knew what he felt, and it terrified her. But she didn't run. She leaned in just enough to rest her forehead against his. He didn't move, didn't speak. But his hand found hers, and he held on like it meant everything. Later that night, in the dim light of her room, Clara wrote. He came back, bleeding, bruised, and still standing. I looked at him, and all I could think was, if this is what it means to love, I might finally understand why people do it anyway. She paused, then underlined the final line 3 times. You waited, he said through blood. I told you I'd break. The sun rose quiet over Laredo. No bells, no gunfire, no laughter, just the slow hush of a town remembering how to breathe. Clara stood in the middle of Main Street, boots planted in the dust, watching as smoke drifted from a collapsed awning across the square. The scent of gunpowder still clung to the morning air, sharp and stubborn. A few men worked to clear rubble from the blacksmith's roof. A wagon limped down the road, carrying one of the wounded wrapped in blankets. Nothing moved fast. No one raised their voice. There was no victory in the silence, only survival. She felt sore everywhere, not from injury, but from bracing herself for something that had already passed. Her muscles hadn't caught up yet. She turned toward the forge. Elias sat outside, his arm in a sling, his face smudged with soot and sleep. He looked like he hadn't moved in hours. Clara walked up, wordless. He didn't flinch when he saw her, just nodded once, like he'd been expecting her. Someone should be resting, she said. I don't sleep easy when people are fixing my roof wrong. She glanced up at the scaffolding. You gave up control for 10 minutes, and now you don't trust anyone again. His mouth twitched. I've been like that since before the bullets. Clara sat beside him on the bench, close but not touching. How bad is it? 2 wounded, no deaths. Most of them got run out past the ridge. Sam says they won't come back, at least not for a while. She looked at him. And you? He shrugged with his good shoulder, still breathing. That's not what I meant. He didn't answer. The silence stretched between them until it softened. Finally, Clara said, you scared me. I scared myself. There it was, a confession tucked in the space between smoke and daylight. He shifted a little, then added, I didn't think I had anything left to lose. Turns out I was wrong. She stared down at her hands. I wasn't in that street last night, but I felt like I was. Elias looked at her. I know. Clara turned to him, eyes steady. You're not metal, Elias. You break and bleed and feel. He gave a tired, wry smile. Don't tell the others, ruins the reputation. Clara wanted to kiss him, wanted to reach across the last of the distance and close it for good. But instead she said, come with me. Where? You'll see. She took him to the chapel, its doors still hanging crooked from the night's chaos. Inside, pews were shoved aside, cots arranged haphazardly for those with minor wounds. Clara led him to the back, where a boy no more than 12 lay on a thin blanket, his leg bandaged and splintered. That's Mateo, she said. He tried to run messages between buildings during the attack, took a fall from the rooftop. Elias knelt beside the boy, gently resting a hand on his shoulder. Brave, he murmured. Clara nodded. You saved his brother, pulled him from the stables before the fire caught. Elias didn't say anything. Clara crouched beside him. You think you're only good with tools, with metal, but you saved lives, you gave people hope. He shook his head. I did what needed doing. Yes, and it mattered. He looked over at her finally, and something in his eyes cracked. I keep thinking of Maria, he whispered, how I wasn't there, how I never got to say goodbye, how maybe if I'd gone with her. Clara reached out, her fingers curling into his good hand. You would have died too. I would have had the chance to choose. And if you had, she said softly, I wouldn't be sitting here. You wouldn't be here to save Mateo or anyone. I wasn't trying to be saved, he said. Clara looked him straight in the eyes. But maybe you were meant to be anyway. He stared at her, breath held like something in him was leaning forward without permission. Then slowly he squeezed her hand. That night, Elias didn't return to the forge. He came to the cafe instead, not for food, just to sit. Clara poured him coffee and said nothing. Lola raised an eyebrow but didn't interfere. The other patrons glanced his way, nodding. There was something different in their looks, not fear, not suspicion, respect. Clara sat across from him. You planning to go back to the forge tomorrow? She asked. He nodded. If I can lift the hammer. You could take a day. I could, he agreed, but I won't. Of course not. A pause. Then almost shyly she added, would you teach me again? His gaze lifted to hers. I'd like that. Later in her room, Clara lit a single candle and opened her journal. He held a boy's hand today and didn't look away. He let me see the cracks and didn't flinch. Maybe that's all we need sometimes. Not perfection, just proof that someone's still willing to try. Then beneath it, she wrote, you waited, he said through blood. I told you I'd break. She smiled to herself, but he didn't. The letter arrived 2 days after the raid. Folded neat, Boston seal, cream paper, black ink, the kind of envelope that looked too clean for this town, too untouched, too full of memory. Clara found it tucked under her door, likely slipped in by one of the delivery boys. Her name written in a hand she knew before her eyes even confirmed it. Precise, slanted, unmistakably his. Thomas Whitwell. He hadn't written in months, not since she'd turned down his quiet, polite proposal just days after her parents' funeral. He'd said he understood, that it wasn't the right time, that maybe someday it could be again. She hadn't replied. And yet here it was his voice, wrapped in paper and waiting. She didn't open it, not at first. She tucked it into the pocket of her apron and went about her morning like nothing had changed. Served coffee, swept floors, ignored the weight pressing against her thigh like the envelope was made of lead. It wasn't until afternoon, when Lola had gone to the market and the cafe was momentarily quiet, that Clara finally sat down in the corner booth and unfolded it. It was short, gentle, full of words like thinking of you and still a place here for you, and I hope you found clarity. Near the bottom it said, my offer still stands, come home, we could start over. Clara stared at the words. She wasn't sure what hit her harder, the invitation itself, or the realization that she didn't feel anything. No spark, no longing, no regret, just distance. She folded the letter again, slow and neat, then placed it on the table. When she looked up, Elias was standing by the door. He hadn't knocked. He never did. You okay? He asked. She nodded. Too fast. Bad news? No. She hesitated. A man I used to know, she said finally. From before, he wrote to ask if I'd consider coming back. Elias didn't flinch, just walked closer. Are you? She didn't look at him. I don't know. You miss it there? No, she said immediately, then paused. But I miss knowing who I was supposed to be. Elias sat across from her. His sleeve still showed a tear from the raid. His knuckles were dark with soot and bandages. Maybe the version of you they wanted back is already gone, he said. She looked at him. Maybe, she said, but I'm not sure who's here instead. That's okay, he said. You're allowed to be in between. Clara swallowed hard. I don't know how to answer him. You just did. She exhaled, quiet and shaky. Then picked up the letter and tore it once, straight down the middle. I don't want safe, she said, mostly to herself. I want real. Elias didn't smile, but something in him settled. You ever think, he said after a beat, that maybe Laredo needs you more than Boston ever did? I'm starting to. Later that evening, Clara sat on the roof of the cafe with Lola, the letter ashes now cooling in the stove below. The sky stretched wide, stars crawling back into place after days of hiding. Lola handed her a flask. Clara took a sip and coughed hard enough to make her eyes water. Why do you drink this? Because it reminds me I'm alive, Lola said, and because the cheap stuff keeps men honest. Clara leaned back against the chimney, the flask warm in her hand. I got asked to go home today, she said. Lola didn't move. That right? I said no. You sure? Yeah, Clara said. I think I am. Lola took the flask back, nodded once. Good, you were just starting to get interesting. They sat in silence for a while, watching the shadows change across the roofs. I don't think Boston ever really saw me, Clara murmured. They saw a version of me they liked, one that stayed quiet, followed the rules. And Elias? Lola asked. Clara's voice dropped. He sees too much. Sounds about right. Is that a good thing? Only if you're brave enough not to hide. Clara closed her eyes. I don't want to be quiet anymore. The next morning she didn't go to the general store. She went to Elias. He was already working back to the forge, hammering a strip of metal into a curve. She stood just outside the doorway, arms crossed. I burned the letter, she said. He didn't look up. Did it feel good? Didn't hurt? He paused, straightened, wiped his hands. Clara stepped closer. I'm not going back to the life I left behind, but that doesn't mean I know exactly what I want now. Elias nodded slowly. Do you need time? I need truth, she said. He considered her for a long moment, then reached into a drawer near the workbench and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. He handed it to her. She unwrapped it. It was a small wooden box, plain but sturdy, with iron corners and a hinged lid. The kind a person might keep letters in or fears. Clara ran her fingers along the edge. What is this? A place to put things, he said. The kind you're not ready to let go of, or the ones you never want to lose. She looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. Are you one of those things? Elias's eyes didn't waver. I don't know, he said, but I want to be. That night, Clara wrote in her journal, I don't want the version of me they remember. I want the version I haven't met yet. She looked at the box, now sitting quietly at the foot of her bed. She placed the torn letter inside, then closed the lid and locked it. I don't want safe, I want real. The wind had changed. It wasn't something Clara could see exactly, nothing dramatic, like a storm rolling in or dust spiraling across the street. But it was there, in the way the air moved slower, in the way the silence between her and Elias had softened from sharp to warm. 2 days had passed since she'd burned the letter, since he gave her the box. Since she'd looked at him and finally let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to keep running to be free. They hadn't talked much since then, but they'd been in each other's company more often, lingering longer at the forge, walking farther along the edges of town. The conversations were easy, small, laced with unspoken questions neither of them seemed ready to ask. On the third morning, Elias knocked on her door. She opened it to find him holding a paper sack and a half smile. Up for a walk? He asked. Clara blinked. Now, you want a schedule? She arched a brow, grabbed her shawl and followed. They walked through the edges of town, past the stables and the empty corral, until they reached a rise overlooking the distant ridge. The sky above them was enormous, so blue it made her feel like she could fall into it. Elias laid the sack on the ground and pulled out bread, cheese, and 2 enamel cups. Simple, practical, but thoughtful. Clara sat beside him in the grass. This a diet? She teased. He shrugged. Depends. You gonna kiss me at the end of it? She flushed, half choked on a laugh, then rolled her eyes. God, you're getting worse. He smiled just barely and looked down at his hands. They ate mostly in silence. The breeze picked up. Clara watched his hands again, how they moved with care, never fidgeted, never rushed. Hands that built things, protected things, held things without crushing them. Why'd you stop dancing? She asked. He didn't look up. I already told you. You said it reminded you of Maria, but that's not all of it. No, he pulled a blade of grass from the ground, rolled it between his fingers. After she died, everything that made me feel good also made me feel guilty, like I didn't deserve anything soft. Clara said nothing. He went on, but you keep showing up. Even when I try to close the door, you don't push. You don't ask for things you haven't earned, you just, her voice was quiet. You make that sound like a compliment. It is. She exhaled slowly, watching the wind ripple through the field below. I've spent most of my life waiting, she said, for people to pick me, for the right time, the right man, the right moment. She turned to him. I don't want to weigh it anymore. I just want to choose. His eyes met hers. They didn't speak. Then slowly, Elias leaned toward her, not rushed, not uncertain, just steady, real. Clara felt her heart rise into her throat. And then finally he kissed her. It was not soft. It was not hesitant. It was slow and warm and full of weight, the kind of kiss that said, you see me, you know what I've been through. And you still want to stay. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead lightly against hers. No going back now, he said, voice rough. I don't want to, she whispered. They sat together like that for a long time, knees touching, breath shared. Then Clara said, you still think you're too broken for this? He didn't answer right away. Then, no. I think I'm just broken enough to do it honestly. She smiled. I can live with that. Back in town, people noticed, not right away, but in the way they moved around each other, how Elias no longer sat alone in the cafe, how Clara walked slower now, like she wasn't waiting for the world to ask her for permission. Lola noticed first. You've got that stupid look, she said one morning, pouring Clara coffee. What look? The one that says someone kissed you like they meant it. Clara smiled, didn't deny it. Lola raised an eyebrow. Well, took long enough. That evening, Clara helped Elias close the forge. It had become a rhythm between them, her hands learning the tools, his voice low as he explained the craft he once thought belonged only to the past. "Do you miss the war?" she asked suddenly. He looked up, surprised. "No, you think it made you who you are?" He considered that. "I think it burned away everything I thought I was, left me with ash and steel. The rest I had to build from scratch." Clara stepped closer, and now he met her gaze. "Now I'm learning that being unmade isn't the same as being unworthy." She touched his arm. "That's a start." He looked down at her fingers on his sleeve, then back up. "If I kiss you," he said softly, "I need you to mean it like a vow." Clara leaned in. "I already did. That night," she wrote in her journal, "we didn't fall in love. We walked into it slowly, with full view of each other's damage, and still I reached out. Still he stayed." Then she underlined it. "If I kiss you," she says, "I need you to mean it like a vow." The trouble didn't start with a gunshot. It started with a glance. Mrs. Palmer, the dressmaker, gave Clara a look as she passed her in the street, tight-lipped, chin up, the kind of look that said you've changed, and not in a way she approved of. Next came the whispers, not loud, just loud enough. A group of women near the well, voices lowered, eyes not quite meeting Clara's. Someone used the word foolish. Another said fast. It was the way they said it that stung more than the word itself. And then came the shift. The second time Clara walked into the bakery, the woman behind the counter didn't greet her, just wrapped the loaf and slid it across without eye contact. When Clara said thank you, there was no response. She didn't need anyone to explain what was happening. People had seen her walking with Elias, sitting beside him, smiling at him. At first, Clara told herself it didn't matter. She had chosen. She was done shrinking. But by the end of the week, she felt it everywhere, on her skin, in her spine, like grit in her food. She hadn't expected approval, but she hadn't expected this quiet rejection either. She said nothing to Elias. Not yet. He had enough to carry. But when she stopped by the forge that Friday afternoon, she found him in the middle of an argument with Deputy Sam Rourke. "I'm not asking you to ride out," Sam was saying, "just to come talk with them, ease the tension." Elias was shaking his head, jaw set. "They don't want to talk. They want me gone. That's all they've ever wanted. You can't keep assuming that." "I'm not assuming. I've lived it." Sam saw Clara standing in the doorway and stepped back. "I'll let you two talk," he muttered, and disappeared down the street. Elias didn't look at her right away. "I'm guessing you heard." "I saw," he exhaled, rubbing his hands with a cloth. "They think I'm bad for the town, that trouble follows me, that I don't belong here." Clara stepped closer. "That's not true." He looked up at her. "Isn't it?" She didn't answer. Elias tossed the cloth onto the bench and leaned on the work table. "You're the one they want, you with your clean hands and soft voice. You could still go back to Boston and be someone respectable." "I don't want to be respectable," she snapped. "I want to be honest." "That's not how the world works, Clara." "No," she said, voice breaking. "It's not, but I thought this place was different. That maybe here, I didn't have to fit into a box just to be left in peace." Elias turned away. "They're not going to stop talking. Then let them talk." He looked back at her, eyes pained. "And when they come for you the way they came for Maria," the name hit the air like a gunshot. Clara froze. "You think this is the same?" she asked, trembling. "No," he said, voice low, "but I know how fast love can turn into target." She stepped toward him, quiet but firm. "And I'm not Maria. I'm not going to vanish into the night just to keep people comfortable." His eyes searched hers. "I don't want to lose you. Then stop pushing me away before anyone else gets the chance." Later that evening, Clara returned to the cafe. The moment she stepped through the door, she knew the whispers had reached Lola too. The woman didn't say a word at first, just handed Clara a dish towel and pointed to the counter. They cleaned in silence until finally Lola spoke. "You know what I think of most judgmental people?" Clara looked up, eyes burning. "What? They're not scared of what you've done. They're scared of what you're doing that they never had the courage to try." Clara leaned on the counter, the weight of it all sinking into her shoulders. "I thought choosing him would feel like freedom, but now it feels like punishment." "No, honey," Lola said. "Love is the freedom. The rest of it, that's just noise." Clara blinked back tears. "I don't want to hide. But I don't want to be a fight either. I'm tired." Lola dried her hands, crossed the room, and wrapped Clara in a sudden, firm hug. "You're not a fight," she said. "You're the reason someone stopped surviving and started the next day." Clara walked through town with her head high, not to prove anything, not to challenge anyone, but because she refused to disappear. She stopped at the forge, handed Elias a wrapped biscuit, and stood beside him while he worked, said nothing, let her presence be louder than any whisper. When Mrs. Palmer passed by again, Clara didn't flinch. She nodded, once, slow, and when the woman looked away, Clara felt something small shift in the air. Not approval, not acceptance, but the edge of it. That night, Elias found her outside the general store, sitting on the steps beneath a quiet sky. He sat beside her without a word. I'm not going anywhere, she said. I know, they are still talking. They always will. She leaned into him just slightly, then let them. He looked at her, hand reaching for hers. Let them talk, she repeated. I'm not hiding anymore. In her journal, she wrote, they don't have to love me, but they will have to see me, because I am not a scandal. I am a woman choosing with both eyes open, and I am not sorry. Then, beneath it, let them talk, Clara said. I'm not hiding anymore. The town had begun to breathe again, not quickly, not easily. But in the way small things return, first the laughter of children in the alley behind the bakery, the open shutters on the sheriff's office, the soft hum of someone sweeping their porch at dusk. No more gunfire, no more letters from back east, just the slow, honest rhythm of ordinary life. And in that space, something else had begun to grow, not loudly, but surely. Elias had started making things he didn't need to make. Small things, a new horseshoe rack for the stables, though the old one worked just fine. A repaired bench outside the cafe that no one asked for. A wooden shelf for the schoolhouse that hadn't even been built yet. He worked quietly, his hands steady, his eyes more peaceful than they'd been since Clara arrived in Laredo. But it wasn't the things he built that had people talking. It was the box, a new one, smaller than the last, carved from dark walnut, with delicate joints and iron inlays. Clara saw it first sitting on the edge of the work table, still unfinished, corners smoothed down like it had already been touched 1,000 times. She didn't ask what it was for. Somehow, she already knew. The following Sunday, Elias walked into the cafe at closing time with something wrapped in canvas under his arm. Clara raised an eyebrow as he set it down on the counter. You're either bringing me a gift or starting a very specific kind of robbery. He smiled, that slow smile she'd grown to crave. Neither. She untied the string and folded the cloth back. The box sat there polished now, corners burnished, hinges quiet and clean. It looked like something you gave to someone not because you owed them, but because you chose them. I made this for you, Elias said, not to replace the first one, but to go beside it. Clara ran her fingers along the lid, then looked up. What goes inside this one? He met her eyes. Whatever's too valuable to lock away. Her breath caught. He didn't drop to one knee, didn't pull out a ring. He just stood there, hands still, heart visible, and asked, will you stay? She didn't answer right away. Not because she didn't know, but because the answer felt too big for just one word. So she walked around the counter, stood in front of him, and wrapped her arms around his waist. Then, voice muffled in his chest, she said yes. They didn't talk about weddings, not yet. No one in Laredo needed a party to believe something was real. What they did need, however, was clarity. And the sight of Elias Boone standing beside Clara Mee Whitaker in broad daylight, carrying a basket of tools together down Main Street, seemed to be enough. The whispers stopped. Not because people had forgotten, but because people had finally accepted. Even Sam tipped his hat a little slower now when he saw them, a knowing smirk in his eyes. You make a good team, he said one morning, watching Elias hand Clara a wrench. She makes me better, Elias said. Sam gave a low whistle. That's about as close to poetry as I'll ever hear from you. Clara just smiled and kept working. That evening, Elias brought her back to the rooftop. Same one where they'd stood weeks ago, the night after the raid. Only now the sky was softer, the breeze kinder, and the space between them completely gone. Clara sat beside him, shoulder against his. You ever think about what happens after this? She asked. After what? After the choosing. After the fear, after the fire. He thought for a moment, then reached over and took her hand. I think it looks like this. Just this. Simple, steady, real. She leaned into him. You sound sure. I'm sure about you. She smiled. I still don't know what forever looks like. Good, he said. That means we'll figure it out together. That night in her room, Clara opened the new box for the first time. Inside, she placed a folded piece of paper blank, except for the single word scrawled in the center. Here. Then she wrote in her journal, he didn't ask me to marry him, he asked me to stay, and that somehow felt more honest. more whole, like I was being invited into something that didn't need ceremony to feel sacred. She paused, then underlined the final line. Now you've been kissed, he said. What are you going to do about it? The morning came quiet. No fireworks, no letters, no breaking news. Just the sun stretching over the ridge and spilling into the valley like it had every day before, but today, Clara noticed. She stood on the back porch of the cafe, coffee warming her hands, listening to the slow rhythm of Leodo waking up. The baker's dog barked once. A wagon creaked past, wheels catching on the groove near the well. Somewhere in the distance, a hammer tapped in time with the birds. This was her life now, not a pause, not a stopgap, but a beginning rooted, still growing. She smiled into the steam. Lola found her just after breakfast, folding napkins behind the counter like she hadn't already done it twice. You're restless, Lola said. Clara looked up. I'm settled, which feels strange. Well, you've spent your whole life waiting for a storm. Now you've got calm and you don't know where to put your hands. Clara smiled. That obvious. Lola poured herself a cup of coffee. To me, yeah, I keep wondering, Clara said slowly, if I'm doing it right. Being here, being in love, being someone else. You're not someone else, Lola said. You're more you than you've ever been. That stuck with her. Elias was at the forge, sleeves rolled, heat rising off the coals. He didn't look surprised to see her. Just pushed a bucket aside and handed her a rag. No errands today, he asked. Nope, I'm yours. He looked at her. She clarified, smiling for the morning. He nodded. Then get over here. I've got a drawer sticking and a bell that's off pitch. She worked beside him for hours, hands dirtier than ever, heart lighter than she remembered it could be. They didn't talk much. They didn't have to. The rhythm of movement, of making things, of choosing each other again and again, that was the language they spoke best. Sometime before noon, Elias reached into the cabinet and pulled out something wrapped in canvas. She eyed it suspiciously. Another box, he smirked. No, this one's not for you. He unwrapped it. It was a sign. Hand-carved, thick wood, letters burned clean across the grain. Boone and Whittaker Forge. Clara froze. You put my name on it. He looked up at her, expression soft. I didn't want you to wonder anymore if this was temporary or if you were just passing through. She touched the edge of the wood, her fingers suddenly trembling. I never asked for this. I know. I don't have a last name that means anything here. You do now. She blinked back tears. He added, quieter, you stayed, Clara. You made something out of this place, out of me. She leaned forward and kissed him, no hesitation, no holding back. Not because it was owed or sweet or expected, but because it was true. That evening Leodo gathered, not for a festival, not for danger. Just because the preacher's wife made too much stew and someone brought music, and the weather was too warm not to share. They came slowly, at first just a few, then more. People who had once whispered now offered bread. Those who had kept their distance now pulled up chairs. No one said the word forgiveness, but it lingered in the air like wood smoke. Clara danced, not beautifully, not confidently, but freely. Elias didn't join her. He stayed near the porch, watching, that quiet smile tucked behind his beard. But when she walked up to him, breathless and glowing, and held out her hand, he didn't hesitate. They danced one slow song, one full, clumsy circle beneath the lanterns. No one interrupted. When the music faded, she pressed her forehead to his chest and whispered, I don't want a perfect life. You won't get one, he said. I want this life. He nodded. Good, because it's ours now. That night, she sat by her window, journal open, pen in hand. She didn't write much. Just this. I came to Leodo thinking I was lost. I stayed because I realized I wasn't. This town, this man didn't fix me. They just stopped asking me to be anything but real. And maybe that's all we need. Not rescue, not reinvention, just a place to lay down the way it. She closed the journal, the moon high outside, then walked across the room to the box Elias had built her, the second one. Inside, she placed a folded scrap of ribbon from her cafe apron, a half-burnt match from the first night she cooked for him, and a note, scribbled on old receipt paper, that read simply, I stayed. She closed the lid, and for the first time in her life, didn't wonder what came next. I don't want a perfect life, she said. I want this life.